The Carter House on Willow Street had stood for 42 years, its white siding and blue shutters fading gently under the Ohio sun. To anyone passing by, it looked like an ordinary suburban home. Oak tree in the front yard, wind chimes on the porch, a worn but loved porch swing. To Linda Carter, it was a living scrapbook of her entire adult life. She had chosen the paint colors, patched the roof with her husband Robert during lean years, and painted height marks of her children inside the pantry door. The crack in the hallway wall came from when her son Michael had kicked his soccer ball inside the house despite repeated warnings. The dent on the banister was from when her daughter Kelly tried to slide down with roller skates on. They used to laugh about those imperfections. "Every scar in this place is a story," Robert would say, patting the banister as if it were an old friend. Now, as Linda stood in the doorway, clutching a box labeled Kitchen Fragile, those scars felt like open wounds. "Mom, you don't have to lift the heavy ones," Michael called from the driveway. He was taller than Robert now, hair flecked with early gray at the temples, stress carving lines into a face that had once been all boyish mischief. "I've got a couple friends coming to help with the furniture." "I'm fine," Linda lied, though her back ached and her hands trembled just enough to make the dishes clink inside the box. At 69, she still moved like someone who had been in motion her whole life. Teaching school, cooking, cleaning, running after kids and grandkids. Stopping felt more painful than the work itself. Robert shuffled up behind her with Rusty, their 12-year-old golden retriever, loyally at his heels. Robert's left hip dragged slightly, the metal replacement in his joint protesting against too much lifting and too many stairs. "Doc says I'm supposed to take it easy," he muttered, ignoring his own medical advice as he reached for another box. Linda watched his jaw tighten as he lifted. The fall from the ladder 6 months earlier had nearly killed him. A broken hip, internal bleeding, a week in intensive care, and a stack of hospital bills that made Linda dizzy when she looked at the numbers. Medicare covered some, their tiny supplemental plan covered less, and the rest had landed on their already strained savings like a landslide. The solution, Michael had said, was obvious: sell the house, pay the bills, move in with him just for a while until things evened out. "We have more space than we need," he'd insisted. "And you and Dad shouldn't be alone while he's still recovering." It had sounded reasonable at the time. Logical, even loving. What Linda hadn't fully processed then was that moving in with Michael also meant moving in with Vanessa. Vanessa Holt Carter, Michael's wife of 12 years, was a polished 38-year-old corporate project manager who approached family life with the same efficiency she used for company budgets. She was smart, articulate, and, at least at first, disarmingly warm. But Linda had always sensed something hard behind Vanessa's smile, like steel beneath silk. Linda placed the box gently on the passenger seat of the old sedan they were selling next week. She'd already said goodbye to the garden, uprooting a few favorite perennials into pots she could take along. The lilac bush, planted the year Kelly was born, would stay behind. So would the maple tree they'd planted when Michael graduated college. Some roots were too deep to move. Inside, the house echoed. The living room was bare except for indentations in the carpet, where furniture used to sit. The photos had been taken down, leaving pale rectangles on the walls. In the kitchen, only the coffee maker remained plugged in, Linda's last stand against the tyranny of change. She poured 2 mugs and carried one into the living room where Robert sat on the steps, breathing heavily. He took the cup with a grateful nod. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly, eyes roaming the now empty room. His hands, scarred from decades of factory work and weekend repairs, trembled around the mug. "Sure," Linda repeated, forcing a smile. "No. But the math doesn't care whether we're sure or not." They had run the numbers a dozen times. Even after selling the house, after paying the hospital, the physical therapy, the specialist who wanted additional tests, there wouldn't be enough to buy a smaller place without taking on a new mortgage. No bank was likely to hand that to a retired couple living on Social Security and a modest union pension. "We could have rented an apartment," Robert said, voicing the argument for the 20th time. "A little place somewhere cheap, we'd figure it out. And when the next medical bill came," Linda countered gently, "or if you needed another surgery, or I did, we'd be one missed payment away from losing that, too." He stared into his coffee, pride warred with exhaustion on his face. Michael shouldn't have to carry this. He's not, Linda answered, though both of them knew that wasn't entirely true. We're helping him too. His shop nearly went under during the slowdown. Selling this place gets us all through. It was only partially a rationalization. Michael's custom cabinetry business had struggled through the recent economic dip. Their grandchildren, Emma and Noah, had overheard arguments about overdue mortgages and the bank calling again. Linda had watched the shame in her son's eyes when he'd finally confessed just how close they were to losing their house. What were we going to do? She asked softly now. Watch our grandkids get uprooted while we sat on all this equity and memories. This is how we help. It's what parents do. She said it to reassure him. She also said it to convince herself. By late afternoon, the last of the boxes were loaded into Michael's SUV and a rented moving van. Neighbors hugged Linda on the porch, pressing little gifts into her hands. Handwritten recipes, small framed photos, a prayer card. Rusty weaved nervously through legs and luggage, sensing trouble in the air. Mom, Dad, ready, Michael called, voice trying for cheerful but landing somewhere closer to strained. Linda took one final walk through the house. She touched the pantry door where pencil lines still marked Michael 4-2 and Kelly 5-1. She paused by the window over the sink where she'd once stood washing dishes while watching her children play in the yard. She traced the edge of the doorway where Robert had leaned. The night he came home early with a bouquet of supermarket roses after their worst fight. In the empty bedroom, a rectangle of unfaded carpet showed where their bed had rested for decades. It looked oddly naked, like a past life stripped of its furniture. Thank you, she whispered into the hollow air, for everything. Then she closed the front door behind her, feeling as if she had just stepped out of a photograph she could never re-enter. Michael's house in the newer subdivision across town could have been on the cover of a home decor magazine. Gray siding, perfect stone accents, a wide driveway leading to a 3-car garage. The front porch had matching rockers and a carefully curated arrangement of seasonal decor. Currently white pumpkins and a chalkboard sign that read, Grateful, thankful, blessed. Vanessa stood in the doorway as they pulled up, her expression picture perfect. Bright smile, glossy chestnut hair in a neat twist, simple gold jewelry that nevertheless looked expensive. 6-year-old Emma peeked out from behind her, curls bouncing while 4-year-old Noah bounced openly in front. Grandma! Grandpa! Noah shouted, barreling down the steps. Rusty barked joyfully and trotted toward him, tail wagging. Vanessa stepped back just enough to avoid Rusty brushing against her slacks. You made it, she said, voice warm in a way that made Linda relax a fraction. We've got your room all ready. The room, not your new room, not your space, just the room. Linda pushed the thought away, determined not to start this new chapter with suspicion. Inside, everything gleamed. The kitchen looked like it had never seen a dirty dish. Marble countertops, stainless steel appliances, a huge island with structured bar stools that matched the backsplash tiles. You guys must be exhausted, Vanessa continued, brisk but polite. I made lemon chicken, your favorite, Linda. I remember you said you loved it. Thank you, Linda said, genuinely touched. Maybe she had misjudged Vanessa. Let me show you your room while dinner finishes, okay? The room was the guest room upstairs. It squeezed 2 nightstands and a queen bed between its walls, with barely enough floor space for the dresser. 2 suitcases on the floor nearly prevented the closet door from opening fully. It would work, Linda told herself. People raised entire families in smaller spaces. Besides, it's temporary, she reminded Robert when she saw his frown. They ate dinner around the long dining table Michael had built himself. Vanessa's one concession to rustic charm in an otherwise sleek home. Conversation flowed easily at first. Grandma, are you going to live here forever now? Emma asked between bites of chicken. Her brown eyes, so much like Michael's at that age, shone with curiosity. We'll be here for a while, Linda answered carefully. Long enough to get tired of your grandpa's jokes. Hey, Robert protested, making a face that earned giggles from both kids. Vanessa laughed too, though hers felt a bit more calculated. I know it's an adjustment, she said, but it'll be so nice having you around to see the kids more often. They've been begging for more time with you. Michael smiled, relief evident. This is going to be good. For all of us. For the first few weeks it was. Mornings began with Emma and Noah launching themselves onto Linda and Robert's bed, demanding stories before school. Linda didn't mind the early wake-up calls. She had been rising at dawn her whole life. Robert played along, groaning dramatically as he pretended to be a monster rising from the deep. Linda baked cookies with Emma in the afternoons, teaching her how to level flour with the back of a knife. Robert helped Noah build a birdhouse in the garage using leftover wood from Michael's shop. Rusty claimed a corner of their room, his bed tucked between the dresser and wall, content as long as he was near his people. At first, Vanessa seemed genuinely accommodating. She left Linda post-it notes with lists of pantry items and encouraged her to make yourself at home in the kitchen. She complimented Robert's patience with the kids, said things like, "They listen to you better than they listen to us." But gradually, the tone shifted in ways Linda couldn't quite articulate at first. It began with small, almost invisible changes. Linda's favorite armchair, the one that had been squeezed in from the old house, was moved from the living room to the upstairs hallway to open up the space. Robert's toolbox, which he kept neatly organized in a corner of the garage, was consolidated into a plastic bin and shoved behind Christmas decorations, so the kids don't get into it. Then came the comments. Always light, always framed as concern. "You know, Linda," Vanessa said one afternoon as they loaded the dishwasher together, "our nutritionist mentioned that seniors do better with smaller portions and less salt. I could help you plan some lighter meals if you'd like. Just thinking of your health." Linda forced a smile. "Thank you, I'll keep that in mind." Later at dinner, when Robert reached for a second helping of mashed potatoes, Vanessa laughed breezily. "Careful, Robert. We don't want you back in the hospital. Maybe let the kids have the carbs." Michael chuckled politely and changed the subject. Linda caught the flicker of humiliation in her husband's eyes. Another time, when Linda forgot she had already put a load of towels in the dryer and started the washer a second time, Vanessa's eyebrows rose in that way Linda had come to dread. "It's the second little slip this week," Vanessa said lightly. "Remember when you left the kettle on last month? I worry about you trying to do too much." "I've always juggled a lot," Linda replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Teaching kids, housework, church." "Of course," Vanessa said smoothly. "It's just as we get older, our brains change. No shame in that. Maybe we could get you one of those reminder apps." Or Michael mentioned his company has a program where a nurse comes in to do quick cognitive screenings. Totally normal these days. The words sounded thoughtful. The way she said them felt like an evaluation. Linda began to notice how often Vanessa mentioned her little mistakes in front of Michael. The time Linda misplaced her reading glasses. The day she watered the same plant twice. The evening she reheated leftovers a bit too long and the edges crisped. "She's tired," Michael would say, frowning. "Mom's been through a lot. With Dad's surgery and the move." "That's exactly my point," Vanessa would reply lightly. "She shouldn't have to carry so much. We need to be realistic about what they can handle." Linda lay awake some nights replaying those conversations, wondering if she was being overly sensitive. Maybe Vanessa truly was just concerned. Maybe Linda was reading malice where there was only misguided care. Then came the fall. It was 3:07 a.m. when Robert shuffled toward the bathroom, not wanting to wake Linda by turning on the bedside lamp. His hip ached when the weather changed. That night, rain tapped against the windows in a steady rhythm. He moved carefully, hand finding familiar furniture edges in the dark. His foot caught on something new. A decorative gray runner, recently added to the hallway outside their room. His weakened leg couldn't correct in time. He pitched forward, shoulder slamming into the bathroom door, hip twisting sharply as he slid to the floor. His cry of pain ripped Linda from sleep. She scrambled out of bed, heart pounding. "Robert?" Lights flicked on, first in their room, then in the hallway, then along the stairs. Rusty barked frantically, circling Robert as Linda knelt beside him. "Don't move," she ordered, voice surprisingly steady. "Just breathe. Tell me what hurts." "My hip," he gasped, teeth clenched. "Feels wrong, not like before. Different. What on earth is going on?" Vanessa's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and fully awake despite the hour. She appeared at the top of the stairs in a belted robe, hair already pulled back neatly, as if she'd rehearsed emergencies. Michael, barefoot and bleary, rushed up behind her. "Dad, what happened?" "I tripped," Robert grunted, embarrassment warring with pain. "Rug caught my foot." "I'm fine. Just give me a second." "No, you're not fine," Linda snapped, anger rising. Not at him, but at the situation. "Michael, call an ambulance." Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. "An ambulance for a stumble? Let's not overreact. We can help him to bed and call the doctor in the morning." Michael hesitated, torn. "Dad, can you stand?" Robert tried to push himself up, face going ashy gray. A strangled sound escaped him as weight hit the injured hip. He collapsed back to the floor, sweating. "Ambulance," Linda repeated firmly. Now, this time Michael obeyed. At the hospital, X-rays confirmed the replacement joint had shifted dangerously. It hadn't fully dislocated, but the orthopedic surgeon warned that another similar fall could cause catastrophic damage. New physical therapy orders were written. More follow-up appointments scheduled. More bills added to an already drowning stack. When they finally returned home just after dawn, everyone was exhausted. Michael helped Robert to the guest bed, setting up extra pillows and fetching pain medication. Linda tucked the blanket around him, brushing damp hair from his forehead. In the hallway, Linda heard Vanessa on the phone, her voice low but distinct. "This is exactly what I've been saying," she murmured. "They're not safe here. We've had another incident." "Yes, a fall." "No, he shouldn't have been up alone, but they won't admit their limitations." Linda froze just beyond the cracked door. "I understand the liability concerns," Vanessa continued. "That's why I wanted to get ahead of this months ago. If we wait until there's a fire or a broken neck, it'll be too late. We need to move forward with the evaluation and the guardianship conversation." Guardianship. The word slammed into Linda like a physical blow. She backed away silently, blood roaring in her ears. In the guest room, Robert's eyes met hers, reading the shock on her face. "What is it?" he whispered. Linda swallowed, barely trusting her voice. Later, she whispered back, "Rest for now." But there would be no rest. Not for either of them. Over the next week, the atmosphere in the house changed in ways even the children could feel. Vanessa, always scheduled and efficient, seemed to ramp up another gear. She left pamphlets on the kitchen counter about senior living options and caring for aging parents. When home isn't safe anymore, she scheduled a home safety assessment without asking Linda or Robert's opinion. A young man in a polo shirt arrived one afternoon with a clipboard. He walked through each room, checking off boxes. "Rugs can be a trip hazard," he said. Glancing at the hallway runner, Linda almost laughed at the irony. They may need assistance with nighttime bathroom visits. Adult briefs could help minimize risk. Robert stared at the floor, jaw clenched. "Who asked you to come?" Linda finally demanded. "Mrs. Holt Carter scheduled the evaluation," he answered politely. "Standard part of our family care package." Family care, it sounded so benign. That evening, Vanessa presented their options in the living room, as if she were running a business meeting. "There's a place called Maple Ridge Center," she began, remote in hand, showing polished photos on the TV. "Assisted living, on-site nursing, memory care units if needed. They have activities, meal plans, housekeeping, everything. It's really nice." "We're not going to a facility," Robert said flatly from his corner of the sofa. His cane leaned within arm's reach. "Dad, just listen," Michael urged. "Vanessa did a lot of research." "I'm sure she did," Robert replied. "But your mother and I are capable adults. We don't need to be locked away in some place where they take our keys." Vanessa kept her tone carefully calm. "No one is talking about locking anyone away. Maple Ridge is a community, not an institution. There are waiting lists for places like this." "We are not interested," Linda said, matching Robert's firmness. "We came here because we were told we were welcome. Not as a problem to be solved, but as family." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "No one's saying you're a problem." "Then stop treating us like one," Robert shot back. The conversation ended without resolution, but Linda knew it wasn't over. Vanessa was not the type to abandon a plan once she'd built a spreadsheet for it. That night, as Linda brushed her teeth, she noticed something new on the counter. A plastic pill organizer with compartments labeled Morning Evening Linda and Morning Evening Robert. "What's this?" she asked. Vanessa appeared in the doorway as if summoned. Just something to help keep track of your meds, she said lightly. Michael and I worry you might get them mixed up. It's easy to do at your age, at my age, Linda repeated quietly. I've managed our prescriptions for years without your help, and you've never made a mistake, Vanessa countered, one eyebrow lifting. Because Doc Harris mentioned there was some confusion with your cholesterol meds last year. Linda's grip tightened on the sink. He had to clarify a dosage. It was his handwriting, not my memory, Vanessa shrugged. Look, you can be offended, or you can accept help. I'm trying to keep everyone safe. The phrase lingered long after Vanessa walked away. Keep everyone safe sounded noble. It also sounded like a cage. The turning point came on a Tuesday night in late October. Cold rain streaked the windows. Emma and Noah had gone to bed after a movie. Michael was working late at the shop, catching up on orders before the holidays. The house was unusually quiet. Linda lay awake, unable to shake the feeling that something was closing in around them. Robert slept fitfully beside her, muttering occasionally. Rusty snored gently in his corner. From somewhere below, a murmur of voices floated up through the vent. Linda recognized Vanessa's cadence immediately. She was on the phone. Linda eased out of bed, careful not to jostle Robert. She padded across the room and knelt near the floor vent, heart suddenly pounding for reasons she did not yet understand. Yes, I have the records, Vanessa was saying. Dr. Harris has documented repeated memory lapses and behavioral changes. Robert's depression after surgery is in his chart. It's more than enough to raise competency questions. Linda's blood ran cold. I know guardianship is a serious step, Vanessa continued, but we can't wait until something awful happens. The last fall was a warning. They're not safe here, and we're not equipped to provide 24/7 supervision. A pause. Whoever she was speaking to replied too softly for Linda to make out. Yes, I understand the process, Vanessa said. Petition the court, present medical documentation, demonstrate patterns of unsafe behavior. Once guardianship is granted, Michael and I will have authority to make decisions in their best interest. Financial and medical guardianship. Financial. Linda's throat tight. We'd use their Social Security and Robert's pension to cover Maple Ridge, Vanessa went on matter-of-factly. The proceeds from the house sale are still largely intact. That can handle the deposit and initial fees. Long-term, if necessary, we could liquidate remaining assets to ensure their care. Our house, our savings, our lives. Linda's fingers dug into the carpet. Michael's hesitant, Vanessa admitted, voice softening just a hair. He feels guilty, of course, but guilt doesn't pay bills or prevent injuries. Once he sees the numbers in the safety plan, he'll come around. He always does. Another pause. Yes, the earliest hearing date you can get, Vanessa said. The sooner we get this in motion, the better. They're resistant. I'm worried they'll do something impulsive if they sense what's coming. Linda's lungs couldn't seem to pull in enough air. Her heart hammered so loudly, she feared it would drown out the rest of the conversation. The call ended a minute later. Footsteps crossed the kitchen. A cupboard opened, a glass clinked, water ran. Then silence. Linda remained frozen by the vent until her knees ached. When she finally rose and turned, Robert was awake, watching her from the bed. What did you hear? He asked quietly. Linda sat beside him, hands shaking. She told him everything, voice barely above a whisper. Each word felt like a crack in the foundation of the life they had built. By the time she finished, Robert's face had gone a color she didn't like. A washed-out, frightened gray that looked far older than his 72 years. She wants control, he said hoarsely, of our money, our decisions, our lives, all under the banner of keeping us safe. And Michael, Linda choked on his name. He hasn't stopped her. They sat in stunned silence, the hum of the heating system suddenly oppressive. What do we do? Linda finally asked. Robert stared at the far wall for a long time before answering. His voice, when it came, was steadier than she expected. We leave, he said. Leave where? Linda whispered. We don't have a house. We don't have enough money for a new one. We have some cash, Robert interrupted gently. You think I didn't notice you squirreling away bits from the grocery budget? And I did some side repair work for the neighbor last spring, remember? Before the fall. I didn't tell Michael. That money's still in my own account. Linda blinked. I was going to surprise you, she admitted. Maybe a weekend trip somewhere. Before all this. He took her hand. That surprise might save us instead. The enormity of what he was suggesting filled the room. Robert, we're old, Linda said. The word tasting bitter. We have health issues. You can't walk far without pain some days. How are we supposed to just run? He squeezed her fingers. I don't know yet, but I know this. I would rather sleep in a bus station holding your hand than sit in a pretty facility where someone else decides when I can go outside. A tear slid down Linda's cheek. We'd be homeless, she whispered. We'd be free, he corrected softly. Broke, scared, uncomfortable, but free. And still married to each other, not to a system Vanessa chose, they stared at each other in the dim light from the hall nightlight seeping under the door. If we're going to do this, Linda said slowly, we have to be smart, quiet, prepared. He nodded. We plan for 3 days. Gather what we can without raising suspicion. Cash, documents, medications. We don't tell Michael. If he knows, Vanessa knows. And once she knows, she'll move faster with whatever lawyer she's hired. 3 days, Linda repeated. 3 days to dismantle what was left of their old life. 3 days to become fugitives from their own family. Rusty, sensing their distress, lifted his head and whined softly. Linda reached down and stroked his fur. You're coming too, she murmured. We're not leaving you behind. Robert managed a ghost of a smile. He's old and arthritic, he said. Fits right in. They slept little that night. Whenever Linda's eyes closed, she saw Vanessa's calm face explaining to a judge why Linda and Robert were no longer fit to make their own decisions. By morning, their resolve had hardened into something like steel. The next 3 days played out like a strange, fragile performance. On the surface, nothing changed. Linda cooked breakfast, helped Emma with homework, folded laundry. Robert tinkered with a loose cabinet door, watched football with Noah, dozed in his chair. Beneath that surface, everything shifted. Linda quietly gathered their prescription bottles, counting how many pills remained and estimating how long they would last. She called the pharmacy from a grocery store payphone, one of the few left, to request early refills because we might be traveling. She slipped their marriage certificate, social security cards, and Robert's discharge papers from his brief military service into a manila envelope she tucked into the lining of her suitcase. Robert visited the bank under the pretense of checking on a disputed charge. He withdrew almost everything from his small account in cash, hiding the envelope of bills inside an old winter coat in the back of the closet. He found the emergency cash Linda kept taped under the silverware drawer, a habit she'd developed after once locking herself out with no wallet. They both wrote letters to Emma and Noah, kept short to avoid revealing too much, but long enough to assure the children their grandparents loved them deeply. Linda slipped hers inside Emma's favorite storybook. Robert tucked his beneath Noah's box of building blocks. On the second night, Linda stood in Emma's doorway watching her sleep, the child's face peaceful and slack against a tangle of blankets. The carved wooden unicorn Robert had made sat on the nightstand, its painted horn gleaming in the faint glow from the hallway. How do we just go? Linda whispered when she returned to their room. How do we walk away from them? We're not walking away from them, Robert said. We're walking away from her. If we stay, she'll turn them against us by making us the problem. If we leave on our own terms, maybe someday they'll understand. Will Michael? Linda asked. Robert hesitated. I don't know, he admitted, but right now he isn't protecting us. He's watching while she sharpens the knife. We can't wait for him to grow a spine. On the third night, the rain finally stopped. Cold, clear air settled over the neighborhood. The digital clock beside the bed blinked 11:42 p.m. in harsh red numbers. Linda sat fully dressed on the edge of the bed, jeans, sneakers, sweater, coat folded at the foot. Her small suitcase waited in the corner, zipped and ready. Rusty lay by the door, alert as if he knew something important was coming. Robert adjusted the strap of his duffel bag carefully so it wouldn't drag on his hip. His cane leaned within reach. Once more, Linda said quietly, we go out the side door. We don't turn on lights in the hallway. We avoid the loose board by the top stair. We walk 2 blocks to the bus stop. Robert added, 1:05 a.m. is the last city bus headed downtown. From there we figure out the next. They looked at each other in the dimness. 2 people who had raised children, buried parents, survived recessions and illnesses, and the slow disappointments of aging. And now, Instead of enjoying quiet evenings and grandkids' visits, they were about to run away like teenagers. "Ready?" Robert asked. "No," Linda answered. "Let's go." She clipped Rusty's leash to his collar. The dog rose stiffly, tail wagging once as if to say adventure. They opened the bedroom door slowly. The hallway lay dim, lit only by the glow of a nightlight near the kids' bathroom. Linda stepped over the very rug that had nearly sent Robert back to surgery, resisting the urge to roll it up and fling it down the stairs. At Emma's door, she paused. The child slept on her stomach, one arm flung out, hair spread across the pillow like a small halo. Linda wanted to go in, to kiss her forehead, to whisper goodbye. She didn't dare. Instead, she eased the door open just enough to slip a folded note onto the floor, where Emma would see it first thing in the morning. She did the same at Noah's door, heart aching as she heard his soft little boy snores. At the top of the stairs, Robert tested the first step with his cane before putting weight on it. Linda went ahead, carrying both their small bags so he could keep one hand on the railing. Rusty followed, nails clicking faintly on the wood. Every creak sounded deafening. Every shadow on the wall looked like accusation. They reached the bottom safely. The house was dark and still. The marble counters in the kitchen gleamed faintly as Linda moved toward the side door that led to the driveway. On the counter, she placed her house key on top of one of Vanessa's neatly stacked mail piles. For a moment, the small piece of metal seemed unbearably significant, an ending compressed into a simple object. She closed her fingers around Robert's hand. No words were needed. Together, they stepped out into the cold October night, pulling the door shut behind them with the softest possible click. The sky was clear. Stars pierced through the darkness above the cul-de-sac. Most houses were dark, curtains drawn against the chill. A single porch light at the far end of the street cast a weak orange circle on the sidewalk. They walked. Slow, careful steps at first, until the corner. Then a little faster, Linda's grip firm on Rusty's leash, Robert's cane tapping a steady rhythm on the concrete. Neither of them looked back. At the bus stop on Maple Avenue, the glass shelter glowed faintly from a flickering fluorescent light. A bench waited, cold metal slick with condensation. A printed schedule flapped in the breeze, its edges curling. Linda checked the time on her watch. 1:02 a.m., 3 minutes, until the bus that would carry them away from everything they had known. Toward what? Exactly, they had no idea. Robert sank gratefully onto the bench, breath coming a little fast. Rusty sat at his feet, pressing warm fur against Robert's ankle. "Homeless," Linda said quietly, the word finally landing with its full weight. "We're homeless." Robert reached for her hand. His grip was warm and familiar and real. "Maybe," he said, "but we are not helpless, and we are not hers." Headlights appeared at the far end of the street, twin beams cutting through the darkness. The bus approached with a low growl of diesel, slowing as it neared the stop. Its doors hissed open. Linda took one last breath of the air that smelled like damp leaves and distant chimney. It smelled like the life they were leaving behind. "Ready?" Robert asked again, softer this time. "No," Linda answered truthfully. "Let's go anyway." She stepped onto the bus first, Rusty trotting at her side, Robert following carefully behind. The bus pulled away from the curb, and as Willow Street slipped out of sight in the rear window, Linda Carter had no idea that this desperate midnight escape was not the end of her story, but the beginning of a new one she never expected to write. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked. Half to Robert, half to the cracked ceiling. He gave a small, rueful laugh. "Anywhere that isn't under Vanessa's thumb. Anywhere doesn't buy bus tickets," Linda pointed out gently. "We need a direction." He shifted, wincing as his hip protested. "I was thinking south," he said. "Warmer winters, cheaper motels. My old foreman retired to some town in Tennessee. Said the cost of living there is half what it is back here." "You have his address?" she asked. Robert hesitated. "No, just his stories." They both fell silent, the thin edges of their plan fraying under the weight of logistics. Linda mentally counted again. The cash from the bank, the emergency money from under the silverware drawer, the small stash she'd hidden over the years just in case. Even being ruthlessly careful, they had maybe 2, at best 3, weeks before every dollar was gone. 2 or 3 weeks for 2 seniors with medical issues and no safety net to reinvent their lives. A cleaning woman pushed a battered cart along the far wall, mopping absent-mindedly. Her dark hair, streaked with gray, was pulled into a messy bun. She wore tired sneakers and a name tag that read Rosa. She moved like someone who had worked 2, maybe 3 jobs for so long that exhaustion had become part of her posture. When she neared their corner, her gaze flickered over them quickly. The suitcases, the dog, the way Robert's shoulders slumped. She paused, then angled her cart slightly their way. "You folks waiting for a connection?" she asked, accent soft but noticeable. In a manner of speaking, Robert answered, "We haven't picked one yet." Rosa's eyes narrowed just a bit, the way people's do when their instincts wake up. "You buying tickets tonight?" she asked. "Or just staying warm?" Linda flushed, embarrassed at how transparent they must look. "We'll get tickets in the morning," she said. "For now, we're just catching our breath." Rosa nodded slowly. "Security clears the terminal at 3, she said. "No one can stay between 3 and 5 unless they have boarding passes. New policy since some trouble last year." "That's unfortunate timing," Robert murmured. "There's a diner 2 blocks east," Rosa added, pretending to inspect a spot on the floor near their bench. "Ed's place. Open all night. Coffee's cheap. Owner doesn't mind people sitting a while if they order something small." Linda studied her. "Thank you," she said quietly. Rosa shrugged, but her eyes softened. "My mom is your age," she said. "If she was out here at night, I'd hope someone would point her somewhere safe." She pushed the cart away, leaving behind a faint scent of industrial cleaner and unexpected kindness. At 2:50 a.m., the security guard began his sweep, politely but firmly asking everyone without imminent departures to move along. Linda and Robert gathered their things, Rusty stretching stiffly before falling into step beside them. Outside, the night air was knife cold, cutting through Linda's sweater and into her bones. The sidewalks glistened from earlier rain. Neon signs flickered in the distance. They followed Rosa's directions, counting intersections. On the corner of 12th and Pine, a faded sign hanging over a squat brick building announced Ed's Place, open 24 hours in peeling red letters. A bell over the door jingled when they stepped inside, releasing a wave of warmth and the comforting smell of coffee, bacon, and something sugary. The diner's interior was worn but clean. Cracked red vinyl booths, a long counter with round stools, napkin dispensers on every table. A middle-aged man with a beard and a baseball cap stood behind the counter pouring coffee. He glanced up as they entered, eyes lingering on the suitcases and the dog. "Kitchen's still open," he said. "Sit wherever you like. But I gotta say, we're not technically supposed to have dogs inside unless—" "He's with me," Linda said gently. "There was some trouble at home. He keeps my anxiety from spinning out." The man considered this, gaze dropping to Rusty, who sat politely, tail thumping once against the floor before going still. "Doesn't look like he's gonna cause any," the man said finally. "Long as he stays under the table, I won't see him." "Thank you," Linda breathed. They took a corner booth. Rusty slid underneath without being told, resting his chin on Linda's shoes. A waitress approached with menus and a pot of coffee. She was in her late 50s. Hair pulled back with a colorful scarf, apron slightly askew. Name tag reading Marlene. Up close, Linda saw the fine lines around her eyes that spoke more of laughter than worry, though there was worry there too, tucked into the tightness of her mouth. Marlene asked, already pouring. "Yes, please," Linda said. "Just coffee for now." "Coffee and toast," Robert added, scanning the menu prices with a frown. Marlene raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. "I'll bring you a plate of toast and some jam," she said. "Kitchen's slow anyway. Gotta keep them on their toes." When she returned, she set down the plates and lingered a moment, dish towel slung over one shoulder. "You folks look about 4 kinds of tired," she observed. "Come in on the late bus, something like that," Robert said. Marlene's gaze flicked again to their luggage, to the way Linda wrapped both hands around her coffee mug as if it were an anchor. "You traveling for something happy?" she asked. "Vacation visiting grandkids?" Linda forced a small smile. "We left our grandkids behind," she said. "We're in between where we were and where we're going." Marlene studied her for a beat. "That's a lot of words that don't say much," she said gently. "But I get it. Sometimes telling the whole story hurts more than keeping it to yourself." She topped off their mugs without being asked. "You can stay as long as you need," she added. "Boss is out of town, and I've been running this place since before he was born. Just order something every couple hours so it doesn't look like I'm running a shelter in here." We really appreciate it, Robert said. Marlene nodded. My brother came back from Iraq and spent a few months bouncing between couches and bus stations, she said. People helped him out. I just pay it forward when I can. Linda felt something loosen in her chest. A knot of fear that had been tightening since the moment she'd overheard Vanessa talking about guardianship. She swallowed hard. Our son's wife was planning to have us declared incompetent. She heard herself say, use our own money to put us in a place we don't want to live. So we left before she could. Marlene went still, dish towel forgotten in her hand. She really said that? Marlene asked quietly. Out loud on the phone, Linda replied, planning it like a work project. She even said Michael would come around, once he saw the numbers on her spreadsheet. Marlene exhaled slowly. Lord, she muttered. Family can cut deeper than any stranger on the street. She glanced toward the counter. That's the guy pretending he owns this place. He'll let you sit in that booth till my shift's over at 7. After that, day crew comes in, and they'll start asking questions I don't feel like answering. You got anywhere to go after that? Robert exchanged a look with Linda. Not yet, he admitted. Marlene drummed her fingers lightly on the tabletop, thinking. Look, she said finally. My cousin Frank comes in most mornings around 6. Drives a delivery truck out to some little town couple hours from here. Old school, pays in cash, doesn't ask too many questions. He's got a soft spot for folks who got screwed over by life. Linda blinked. We can't just ask for a ride. We don't want to be a burden. Marlene's lips twisted. From what you've told me, you've already paid your quota of burden, she said. If Frank offers, it's because he wants to. Let me see what I can do when he gets here. For the next few hours, time moved in slow circles. The clink of dishes, the murmur of overnight regulars, the hiss and pop of the grill. Linda and Robert took turns dozing in the booth, one always half awake to keep an eye on their bags and Rusty, though nothing about the handful of truckers and night shift workers suggested danger. It was quieter than Linda had expected, this first night of their self-imposed exile. No screaming matches, no courtroom, just tired people trying to get through until morning. At 6:15 a.m., the bell over the door jingled, and a tall man in a brown jacket and work boots stepped in, bringing a gust of cold air with him. He was in his late 60s, hair silver at the temples, posture still straight despite the weight of years. He walked like someone who had spent his life moving heavy things and knew exactly how much effort each step required. Hey Frank, Marlene called from behind the counter. You're late. Truck breakdown. Or you stopped to rescue another stray, he snorted. Traffic, smart mouth, got stuck behind a guy doing 20 in a 45. Like his car was held together with prayer and duct tape. He took his usual seat at the counter. Marlene poured his coffee, leaned across the counter and spoke in a low voice, glancing once toward Linda and Robert's booth. Frank turned his head, studying them openly now. His gaze didn't flick away when Linda met it. Instead, he gave a small nod, like two soldiers acknowledging each other across a crowded room. A few minutes later, after some eggs and toast had disappeared from his plate, Frank slid off the stool and walked over to their booth. Up close, Linda saw the faint white lines of old scars across his knuckles. Marlene says you two might be looking for a new zip code, he said without preamble. That right? Linda's hands tightened around her mug. We're looking for somewhere we can afford to breathe, she said, and live without someone waiting to take away the choices we have left. Frank tilted his head. I haul supplies to a little town called Millfield twice a week, he said. About 3 hours southeast. Quiet place, rent's cheap, people nosy but mostly kind. I've got 2 empty seats in the cab today and no boss watching my mileage. If you want, I can get you there. Robert's suspicion flared automatically. Why? He asked. You don't know us, lady behind the counter does, Frank replied, jerking his thumb toward Marlene. She says you're running from trouble that looks a lot like what almost swallowed her brother when the VA wouldn't help. That's good enough for me. He paused, then added, besides, when I was 20, some old guy gave me a free ride across 3 states, when I'd burned every bridge I had. Said the only repayment he wanted was for me to do the same someday if I got the chance. Been looking for the right folks for a long time. Linda swallowed hard. We don't have much, she admitted. We can pitch in for gas a little. But after that, we'd be starting from nothing. Frank's expression didn't change much, but something softened at the edges. You got more than you think, he said. You got 2 sets of hands, a brain apiece, and enough pride to walk out of a bad situation before someone stripped you of it. Small towns run on folks like that. Is there work? Robert asked. Anything an old man with a half-metal hip can still do. Frank scratched his chin. Millfield's got a hardware store that's always understaffed, a church with a leaky roof, and more broken fences than teenagers willing to fix them, he said. And the diner there, different one from this, makes pies that taste like cardboard. If you can bake better than that, you'd be performing a public service. Linda couldn't help a small laugh. I've been told my apple pie can end family arguments, she said. Now that's a marketable skill, Frank said. He looked at his watch. I roll out in 30. Truck's parked 2 blocks down. You got till then to decide. No pressure. I'm not running a charity caravan. He walked back to the counter, leaving Linda and Robert staring at each other. This is insane, Robert said under his breath. Get in a stranger's truck, go to a town we've never heard of, with no guarantee of anything. Linda thought of Vanessa's cool, efficient voice outlining their future in front of a judge. She thought of Maple Ridge brochures on the kitchen counter, of pill organizers with her name on them, of her signature on guardianship papers she would never willingly sign. Compared to what? She asked quietly. The sane option is to go back, sit in our guest room, and wait for someone to declare us unfit to decide when we can go to the grocery store. Robert didn't answer. We don't have to stay in Millfield forever, she continued. But we need a starting point. A place to land that isn't a bus station bench. A bed we pay for ourselves, even if it's lumpy. Work that makes us tired in a good way, not the kind of tired that comes from fighting to justify our right to exist. Rusty thumped his tail once under the table, as if casting his vote. Robert sighed. When did you get so brave? He asked. Linda gave a shaky smile. I've been raising other people's kids for 35 years, she said. You think I didn't pick up a few survival tricks? He covered her hand with his. Let's do it, he said. Let's say yes to something we haven't had time to overthink. They approached the counter together. Frank looked up from his coffee with one eyebrow raised in silent question. We'll take the ride, Linda said. If the offer still stands, he nodded once. Meet me out front in 15, he said. Blue box truck with Millfield Supply Co. On the side, bring the dog. He looks quieter than half the guys they make me haul lumber with. The truck was old but sturdy, its cab high enough that Robert had to maneuver carefully to climb in. Frank stowed their suitcases behind the seats and spread an old wool blanket across the bench. Dog can ride in the middle, he said. I've had worse passengers. Rusty leaped up with more enthusiasm than grace, landing half in Linda's lap before rearranging himself, so his front paws rested between them and his back end leaned against Robert. He sighed contentedly, as if this were all part of some long-planned vacation. As they pulled away from the city, skyscrapers gave way to industrial yards, then to stretches of highway lined with billboards and leafless trees. The late October sun crept up slowly, smearing pink and orange along the horizon. For a while, no one said much. The hum of the engine and the rhythm of tires on asphalt created a kind of temporary peace. You two have kids besides the one you ran from? Frank asked eventually. Eyes on the road. A daughter, Linda said. Kelly, she's in Seattle. Tech job, tiny condo, lives on sushi and deadlines. We talk, but not about the hard stuff. She'd fly out if we called. Vanessa would answer the door before she ever got to us. And calling would leave a trail, Robert added. If we go back, it has to be when we're not walking straight into Vanessa's net, Frank grunted in understanding. My old man died in a nursing home he didn't pick, he said. Doctor said it was his heart. I say it was the way they talked over him like he was furniture. Once you take a man's say-so, the rest goes easy. Linda studied his profile. You ever married? She asked. Once, he said. She got sick. Cancer. We didn't have kids. After she was gone, it was just me and the road. Easier to keep moving than sit in an empty house listening to the fridge hum. Marlene hadn't mentioned that part. Linda filed away the detail. A tiny mosaic tile in the picture of who this man was. and why he might stop for strangers at 6 in the morning. About an hour into the drive, they stopped at a rest area. Frank stretched his back, joints popping audibly. Robert moved slowly, testing his hip on the gravel. "You holding up?" Linda asked him softly. "I've been worse," he said. "And at least this time, if I fall, it won't be on a designer rug someone bought to impress her book club." They took Rusty to a small patch of grass, the dog sniffing every inch as if cataloging their new chapter. Linda bought 3 coffees and a bag of day-old muffins from the vending kiosk, pressing one cup into Frank's hand without asking whether he wanted it. "Payment," she said. "For services rendered." He accepted it with a nod. "Keep your money," he said. "You're gonna need every penny when we get there." When they climbed back into the truck, Robert moved more slowly. Frank noticed. "Pain meds?" he asked. "Took some this morning," Robert said. "Doc says I shouldn't overdo it. I try to save them for nights." Frank tapped the steering wheel. "There's a clinic in Millfield," he said. "Dr. Patel. She's tough, but she listens. My mother likes her, and my mother hates everyone who isn't from the old country. I'll see if she's taking new patients." "You're doing a lot of planning for people you just met," Linda observed. Frank shrugged. "We're 3 hours into being in each other's lives," he said. "That's plenty of time to decide if someone's worth helping. I've spent that long stuck in a break room with guys I'd happily never see again." They drove the rest of the way with the kind of easy silence that forms when people who have all lost something big recognize that words can only do so much. By late morning, the highway narrowed, then turned into a 2-lane road flanked by fields and patches of forest. A faded wooden sign finally appeared. "Welcome to Millfield, Pop. 4872. It wasn't much to look at from a distance. A water tower with the town's name in chipped blue letters. A cluster of houses with small porches and mismatched paint jobs. A main street lined with brick buildings that had seen better days but still stood their ground. As they rolled down that main street, Linda saw a grocery store with hand-painted sale signs in the windows. A hardware store with shovels and rakes leaning out front. A barber shop with an honest-to-God striped pole. And a diner with a sign that declared Betty's Kitchen home of the famous meatloaf. A woman in her 70s stood outside the diner, arms crossed, watching the truck rumble by. She had short white hair, glasses on a chain, and the kind of posture that said she'd carried her share of weight and wasn't interested in anyone's nonsense. Frank honked once. She lifted a hand in a half wave, half salute. "That's Betty," he said. "Runs this place tighter than the army. If she doesn't like you, she won't bother being polite about it. If she does, well, then you've got a friend for life and free refills on coffee until you die." "Good to know where the power lies," Linda murmured. Frank turned onto a side street and pulled behind a low building with a faded sign that read, "Millfield Supply Co." He parked, killed the engine, and turned to face them. "First things first," he said. "I can get you a week at the Maple Grove Motel on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but the mattresses aren't made of rocks, and the owner still believes in cash and handshakes. After that, you're on your own." "A week is more than we had this morning," Linda said. He nodded. "I'll front you the first few nights," he continued. "You can pay me back if things work out. If they don't, well, then I'll have to live with the shame of having been wrong about someone, and I've survived worse." Linda blinked in surprise. "We can't let you—" "You can," he interrupted, "because I'm a stubborn old fool who won't take no for an answer when he's made up his mind. Besides, I'll put you to work unloading the truck this afternoon. Call it a down payment." Robert straightened a little. "I can lift," he said quickly. "Carefully. I'm not useless." "No one said you were," Frank replied. "I'll have you sort inventory, not haul concrete. I may not have a medical degree, but I know better than to break my investments." He winked to soften the words. Linda felt something she hadn't dared feel since selling their house. A flicker of possibility. Not certainty, not safety, but the fragile beginnings of something that might someday resemble a life again. Frank drove them to the Maple Grove Motel, a squat, L-shaped building with doors that opened directly onto the parking lot. The sign out front flickered between Map E Grove Moke Dell, depending on how cooperative the bulbs felt. Flower boxes sat under a few windows, their soil mostly bare except for a stubborn marigold or two. Inside the small office, A woman in her 50s with a messy ponytail and a sweatshirt that read, "I Heart Millfield," looked up from a paperback novel. "Got a couple of long-term tourists for you, Joanne," Frank said. "Need a weekly rate? Room on the ground floor? No questions about dogs." Joanne's eyes flicked to Rusty, who sat obediently at Linda's heel. "Is he a barker?" she asked. "Only at people who deserve it," Linda said. Joanne considered this, then shrugged. "I got a nephew that fits that description," she said. "Room 7's open. Weekly's $150 cash. No smoking, no frying bacon in the room. And if anything breaks, tell me before it floods the building." "We'll pay for the first week," Linda said, reaching slowly for her wallet. Frank's hand closed gently over hers before she could pull the money out. "I said I'd cover a few nights," he reminded her. "Let me be right about people for once, all right?" Linda hesitated, then nodded, swallowing the urge to argue from pride. She would pay him back, somehow. The room itself was small but clean. 2 double beds with mismatched spreads, a small table and 2 chairs. A dresser with a television older than Emma. The bathroom smelled faintly of bleach and lavender. The window looked out over the parking lot, where the water tower rose in the distance like a sentry. Linda set her suitcase on the bed and unzipped it. The sight of their carefully folded clothes, the envelope of documents, the pill bottles rattling faintly, grounded her. "We made it," Robert said behind her. "Not anywhere fancy, not anywhere we ever planned. But we're not in Vanessa's house anymore." Linda turned and wrapped her arms around him. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing in time, Rusty pressing against their legs as if trying to fuse them all into one solid, unbreakable shape. "Rest up," Frank said from the doorway. "I'll swing by in a couple hours. We'll unload the truck, then I'll take you to Betty's. She'll want to size you up herself." After he left, Linda lay back on the bed fully clothed, just to test the mattress. The next thing she knew, she was waking up 2 hours later to the sound of someone knocking gently on the door. Robert was already up, smoothing his hair back with one hand. Rusty sat alert by the door, tail thumping in a restrained rhythm. It was Frank as promised. "You two nap like teenagers after prom," he said. "Come on, let's put some boxes on shelves so I don't have to listen to my niece complain." At the supply store, Robert organized light items, screws, nails, small tools, onto labeled shelves while Frank hefted larger boxes. Linda manned the tiny front counter, learning the pricing system and practicing saying, "Welcome to Millfield Supply," with a smile that didn't feel entirely like an act. A couple of customers came in. A farmer needing feed buckets. A young woman with a toddler in tow looking for a replacement rake. Each of them gave Linda a once-over, measuring her with that peculiar small-town curiosity that scans for family resemblance and mutual acquaintances. New in town, Linda offered once or twice, which seemed to satisfy them temporarily. By late afternoon, her feet ached, but in a familiar, satisfying way. Not the soul-deep exhaustion of defending her right to stand in her own son's kitchen. Robert looked tired too, but there was color in his cheeks that had been missing in recent weeks. Frank wiped his hands on a rag and nodded in approval. "Not bad for city folks," he said. "You didn't break anything, and you only undercharged old man Harper by $1. That's practically a record." Linda blinked. "I what?" Frank chuckled. "Relax. He's been arguing about prices since Carter was president. He'll circle back tomorrow to insist you charge him the full amount so he can complain about it." He checked his watch. "Come on. Betty closes the kitchen at 7 sharp for dinner crowd. You want to catch her in a good mood." Betty's kitchen was smaller inside than it looked from the street. All warm wood and the smell of frying onions. A chalkboard listed daily specials in looping handwriting. A radio played country music softly in the corner. Betty herself approached their table, pencil behind her ear, pad in hand. Up close, Linda saw that her eyes were a surprisingly vivid blue, sharp and assessing. "You're Frank Strays," she said by way of greeting. "Apparently," Robert replied dryly. Betty's mouth twitched like it wanted to smile, but hadn't decided if it was worth the effort. "What'll you have?" she asked. "Meatloaf's good today. So is the chicken and dumplings. Avoid the clam chowder unless you enjoy regrets," they ordered. Betty scribbled, then paused. "You planning on staying a while?" she asked, not unkindly. "We're hoping to," Linda said carefully. "If the town will have us," Betty snorted softly. Town doesn't get a vote, she said. You pay your bills. You're polite to the cashier at the grocery store, and you don't park in front of the hydrant on Main Street. You're as Millfield as anyone else. She started to walk away, then turned back. You cook? She asked Linda abruptly. I've been feeding people my whole life, Linda answered. Family church potlucks, school events. I bake too. Betty studied her again. Pies? She asked. Yes, crust from scratch or from a box. From scratch, Linda said, almost offended on behalf of apples everywhere. Betty's gaze flicked to Frank, who pretended to study the salt shaker. Tomorrow, Betty said, be here at 10. Bring your hands. We'll see if you can tell the difference between a rolling pin and a paperweight. Linda blinked. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance not to insult this town with my sorry excuse for dessert, Betty said. You work a trial week. If customers stop sending back the pie half-eaten, we'll talk about pay. She walked away before Linda could respond, which apparently was her way of saying the conversation was over. Frank leaned back in his chair, smugness radiating off him like heat. See, he said. Told you small towns run on people like you. Linda stared after Betty, heart pounding harder than it had when she'd stepped onto that city bus. A kitchen, an oven, a counter dusted with flour because of her, not someone else's rules. It was such a simple thing, and yet it felt like being handed a key. Across the table, Robert caught her eye. "We might just pull this off," he murmured. "Don't jinx it," she whispered back. They ate in near silence, each bite of meatloaf tasting like more than just dinner. It tasted like the possibility of belonging somewhere that wasn't built on obligation and control. Even as Millfield began, slowly, to make a little room for them, the life they'd fled was not standing still. Back in Michael's spotless kitchen, sunlight streamed across the marble counters, turning the house key Linda had left into a sharp, accusing glint of metal. Vanessa stood with the note from the guest room in her hand, lips pressed into a thin line as her eyes scanned the looping handwriting. Michael's face had gone chalk white when he'd read it the first time. He now sat at the table, letter spread out in front of him, as if reading it again might change the words. "They're gone," he said, voice hollow. "They actually left." "Of course they did," Vanessa replied, though her tone carried more annoyance than surprise. "I told you they were becoming unpredictable. This proves it. They're not runaways, Vanessa," he said. "They're my parents. They're in their 70s. Dad just had surgery. Mom has, 4 prescription bottles to manage every day. They can't just vanish into the night like teenagers." "And yet they did," Vanessa said, "after everything we've done to keep them safe." Michael looked up sharply. "You mean after everything we've planned without telling them," he said. "Did you ever think maybe they heard something they weren't meant to?" Vanessa's jaw tightened. "If they overheard a private conversation about their welfare, that doesn't change the facts," she said. "They need more care than we can provide. Maple Ridge is still the best option." "They don't want Maple Ridge," Michael shot back. "They made that very clear." "Look where their wants got us," Vanessa replied. "A missing elderly couple who could be anywhere, with no money, no support, and no plan. This is exactly why we needed legal authority to make decisions, for their own good and ours." Michael stared at her, seeing, not for the first time, but perhaps more clearly than ever, how much of her concern was braided with control. "I'm going to call the police," he said. "And the hospitals. And Kelly. Maybe they went to her." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Cross country without telling anyone, with your father's hip and your mother's issues?" she asked. "He's serious." "I'm completely serious," he said. "If something happens to them out there, I'll never forgive myself for not stopping this sooner." "And how exactly were you going to stop them?" Vanessa demanded. "Chain them to the guest bed. Sign the guardianship papers faster. You can't protect people from themselves if they're determined to be martyrs." The word hung in the air like a slap. Michael stood slowly. "When the court date comes," he said quietly, "if they're still gone, we won't have anyone to present for guardianship, will we?" Vanessa's nostrils flared. "We'll have evidence of irrational behavior," she said. "Abandoning stable housing without a plan, disappearing without leaving a reliable way to contact them." "They left notes," he interrupted. "For the kids, at least. They didn't vanish to hurt us. They left because they felt cornered." "They left because your mother has always dramatized everything," Vanessa snapped. "And your father refuses to admit he's not invincible anymore. They're acting like children. and we're the ones stuck cleaning up the mess. Emma stood in the doorway, clutching the unicorn Robert had carved for her, eyes wide and confused. Noah hovered behind her, one hand fisted in his sister's t-shirt. "Mom?" Emma asked in a tremulous voice. "Where did Grandma and Grandpa go? Why is Daddy mad?" Michael turned, his expression softening. He knelt to their level. "Grandma and Grandpa went on a trip," he said carefully. "They should have told us first. We're trying to figure out where they are." "Did we do something wrong?" Noah asked, lower lip wobbling. "They're not mad at us, right?" Michael pulled both children into a hug. "No," he said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. They love you more than anything. If they could, they'd be here right now reading stories and building birdhouses." Emma's gaze slid past him to Vanessa. "Did you make that face again?" she asked. "One you make when Grandma hugs us?" For once, Vanessa had no quick answer. Her mouth opened, then closed. Michael looked up at her over the children's heads, an unspoken question in his eyes that he hadn't quite been willing to ask himself before. What if we're not the only ones who get to decide what safe looks like? In Millfield, Linda woke the next morning before dawn, heart pounding from a dream she couldn't fully remember. Robert snored softly beside her, the sound as familiar as her own breathing. Rusty lay at the foot of the bed, paws twitching in some canine adventure. She lay there staring at the ceiling, the motel's textured plaster weirdly comforting in its ugliness. For the first time in a long time, she felt a day stretching ahead that didn't begin and end with someone else's evaluation of her usefulness. 10 o'clock at Betty's. Pie crusts, flour on her hands instead of guilt. She took a slow breath. "We're really doing this," she whispered into the half-light, "from scratch." And somewhere between the life they'd fled and the one they were starting to need into existence, forces were already moving that would test just how far Linda was willing to go to protect the fragile independence she and Robert had reclaimed. Betty's kitchen smelled like flour and sugar and hot coffee when Linda walked in at 9:55 a.m., hands still trembling slightly despite the calm expression she'd practiced in the motel mirror. The clatter of plates and low murmur of regulars created a background hum that felt almost like a heartbeat. She wiped her palms on her jeans and stepped behind the counter as if she belonged there. "You're early," Betty observed, glancing up from the register. She wore a navy apron streaked with batter and carried the same air of brisk competence Linda had admired in good principals and choir directors her whole life. Good sign. People who are late for dough don't last. "I figured I'd rather mess up before opening than during the lunch rush," Linda answered. It was half joke, half confession. Betty's eyes flicked to her measuring. "Flowers in the big bin by the back door," she said. "Sugars in the silver canister. Pans are there, rolling pins there, apples in the fridge. You know what a real pie is supposed to taste like. Make me one." "One?" Linda repeated. Betty nodded. "If that one comes out like it should, I'll let you make more. If it doesn't, we'll feed it to Frank and see if he complains. That's the test." In the kitchen, Linda set her purse down on a hook and exhaled slowly. This was what she knew. Not hearings, not petitions, not legal terms. Like guardianship and competency. Flour, fat, cold water, patience. Her hands remembered the sequence before her brain finished listing the steps. Measure flour with the back of the knife leveled just right. Cut in cold butter until the mixture looked like coarse sand with a few larger pebbles. Add water a spoonful at a time, just enough for the dough to come together when pressed. Not so much that it turned sticky and sullen. She rolled the crust out carefully, the rhythm of the pin against the counter soothing her jittery nerves. Apples peeled and sliced, tossed with sugar and cinnamon, and a whisper of nutmeg. She mounted them high, knowing they'd slump as they baked, then laid the top crust over like a blanket, crimping the edges with practiced fingers. When she slid the pie into the oven, a strange feeling washed over her, like stepping onto solid ground after days at sea. For the first time since leaving Willow Street, she wasn't just running from something, she was making something. Creating, not escaping. Betty appeared in the doorway as the smell of baking apples filled the kitchen. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "You're not measuring from a recipe," she observed. "I've made this one enough times to have it in my bones," Linda said. "Kids used to call it apology pie because I'd bake it whenever I messed up and needed to say sorry." She asked. Linda thought of Michael, of Vanessa, of the court papers that might already be in motion with their names at the top. She shook her head. "Right now," she said quietly, I'm just trying to prove to myself I can still do something right. Betty didn't answer at first. When she spoke, her voice was a shade softer. Timer's set for 45, she said. Go pour coffee. If that pie's half as good as it smells, you won't have to prove much. By noon, 5 slices of Linda's pie had vanished. Betty watched customers' faces as they took the first bite. Paul from the post office, Mrs. Henderson from the thrift store, 2 high school kids sharing a plate, Frank wolfing his down at the counter. No one left a crumb. All right, Betty declared, flipping her order pad shut. You're hired. Mornings 4 days a week. We'll pay by the hour and by the pie. Don't get cocky. This town turns on you fast if you burn the crust twice in a row. Linda laughed, relief flooding her so quickly she had to grip the edge of the counter for a second. I won't burn it, she said. Some things you don't forget. Betty gave a brisk nod, as if she'd merely assigned Linda to bussing tables. But later, when she thought Linda wasn't looking, she quietly took down the sign near the register that read, Ask about our store-bought desserts. That afternoon, on the other side of town, Robert sat in a small exam room at the Millfield Clinic, hands folded over the cane balanced between his knees. The walls were painted a calming blue. Motivational posters about heart health and flu shots tried to make medicine look friendly. Dr. Asha Patel, compact and brisk with tired eyes and a no-nonsense bun, flipped through his chunky file. So, she said, you survived a ladder fall, have a metal hip, and decided your son's house was more dangerous than surgery. That about right. Robert huffed a laugh. Something like that. She glanced at him over her glasses. Any dizziness, new falls, chest pain? Just the occasional reminder I'm not 30 anymore, he said. Pain's manageable. Linda makes sure I take my pills on time. She counts them like they're gold. Dr. Patel nodded, jotting notes. Notes, good woman, your wife, she said. She's listed as your emergency contact. You want to keep it that way? Yes, he said firmly. Any other family I should know about? She asked. Kids? Grandkids? 2 kids, 2 grandkids, he answered. My son, he lives in the city we left. My daughter's in Seattle. We're taking a break from all that right now. Dr. Patel studied him for a moment. I'm going to request your previous records from your old doctor, she said. Continuity of care is important. That okay with you? Robert hesitated just long enough for her to notice. If I ask for them, he'll know where we are, he said. Yes, she said, he might. She closed the folder gently. Look, Mr. Carter, she continued. I work with elders who get steamrolled by their own families all the time. I've written too many letters for guardianship hearings where nobody asked the patient what they wanted. If you tell me not to contact your old doctor, I won't. But that means I'm flying blind on some things that could affect your health. Robert stared at his hands. How often, he asked quietly, do those families actually need guardianship? Sometimes, Dr. Patel said. Dementia's real. So is self-neglect. Other times it's about money, convenience, old resentment, hard to separate cleanly. She leaned forward slightly. Here's what I can do, she offered. We draw some blood, run some basic cognitive tests, get a picture of where you are now. If you want, I can give you and Linda information on setting up your own power of attorney and medical directives, with names you choose. So if anyone tries to drag you into court, you've already got paperwork saying who speaks for you. Robert blinked. We can do that without my son, he asked. It's your life, she said. The law recognizes that, for now at least. Might as well use the rights while you've got them. He exhaled. Request the records, he said finally. If trouble comes, it'll come whether we give our doctor a new address or not. No point making you guess about my blood pressure meds just because I'm scared of a phone call. Dr. Patel nodded once, as if she'd expected that answer. Good, she said. Now let's see if that metal hip of yours is as impressive as the surgeon thought. Over the next several weeks, life in Millfield settled into a strange, fragile new normal. Mornings, Linda walked from the motel to Betty's kitchen with Rusty trotting beside her, breath puffing white in the colder air as November crept closer. She baked pies and eventually cinnamon rolls that had farmers showing up 15 minutes before opening just to claim one before they sold out. Word spread quickly. Betty's got a new baker. The crust alone's worth repenting for. Robert split his time between the supply store and small odd jobs Frank tossed his way. He showed a teenage clerk how to patch drywall without making a bigger mess. Taught a farmer's grandson how to sand a wooden toy smooth enough for little hands. Fixed a creaky porch step for Joanne at the motel in exchange for a discount on their room. On Sundays, they attended the small Methodist church at the end of Main Street. The congregation, starved for fresh faces, greeted them with casseroles and too many questions. Linda joined the choir after one rehearsal. Robert helped the pastor replace a broken light in the fellowship hall, working from a much shorter ladder than the one that had nearly ended his story. Evenings at the motel, they ate simple dinners on paper plates and watched the local news fuzzily on the old TV. Linda kept their important documents in a neat folder by the bedside. Driver's licenses, social security cards, marriage certificate, Dr. Patel's printout about healthcare proxies and living wills. She read that one twice, highlighter in hand. One night she handed the pen to Robert. "Who do you want to list?" she asked. "If something happens and you can't speak for yourself, you," he said immediately. "And if something happens to both of us at once," he paused, weighing the names of their children like fragile glass. "Kelly," he decided. "Not because she loves us more, but because she'll ask questions before signing anything." "It's her nature," Linda nodded, though something twisted in her chest at the quiet omission of Michael. They weren't erasing him. They were just adjusting the order of trust. They signed the forms. Witnesses from the motel staff initialing where required. It felt like laying sandbags around a house before the waters rose. But the waters had already started moving elsewhere. In his office back in the city, Dr. Harris frowned at the fax from Millfield Clinic. Requesting records for Robert Carter, the cover sheet read, "New patient, continuity of care. Please forward recent lab results, imaging and medication list." He glanced at the intake form attached. New address, Maple Grove Motel, Room 7, Millfield. New primary contact, Linda Carter. He checked the date. 3 weeks after Linda and Robert had disappeared from Michael's house. "Interesting," he murmured. He picked up the phone and dialed the number listed as alternate contact in Robert's old chart. Michael answered on the third ring, voice strained. "Michael Carter. Mr. Carter, this is Dr. Harris," the physician said. "Sorry to catch you at work. Do you have a minute to talk about your father?" Michael's stomach tightened. "Did something happen?" he asked. "We haven't. We don't know where they are." "Did the hospital?" "They're not in a hospital," Dr. Harris interrupted. "I received a records request from a clinic in a town called Millfield. Looks like your parents have established care there. I'm required by law to send their information if the patient consents," which he did. "But given our recent conversations about their situation, I thought you might want to know they're alive and apparently making appointment." Millfield. The word meant nothing to Michael. He pulled up a map on his computer with one hand, holding the phone with the other. Small town. A few hours away. Nothing remarkable at first glance. Did he sound coherent? Michael asked quietly. Was Mom with him? He signed the consent in person. Dr. Patel's note read, "Clear understanding of request." They sounded like a married couple who'd decided to handle things on their own. Dr. Harris said, "I'll be honest, Mr. Carter. We doctors see families try to take over patients' lives all the time. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it isn't. Your parents are still very much in the isn't camp, from what I can see on paper." Michael flinched. "We were just trying to keep them safe," he said, hearing how defensive it sounded as the words left his mouth. "I don't doubt that," Dr. Harris replied. "But safe and controlled can look very similar if you're standing on the other side of the equation." He paused. "They made a choice," he added. "You have one now too. You can double down on trying to pull them back into the plan you had for them, or you can go see them and ask what plan they have for themselves." After they hung up, Michael sat motionless for a long time, map of Millfield glowing on his screen. He thought of Emma's question about Vanessa's face when Grandma hugged them. He thought of the folded note Linda had left, tucked now in his desk drawer. The lines about needing air and loving them always, no matter what. When he finally spoke, his voice surprised him with its steadiness. "Vanessa," he called out toward the living room, where she sat with her laptop open, calendar blocked in color-coded squares. "Can you pause for a second? We need to talk." She looked up, fingers hovering over the keys. "This working mom's train doesn't stop easily," she said lightly. "What's up?" "I know where they are," he said. Her eyes sharpened. "Your parents?" she asked. "Where?" "A town called Millfield," he said. "They found a clinic. They're seeing a new doctor." Vanessa's jaw clenched just slightly. "Just slightly. So they're still making impulsive decisions," she said, "running away instead of accepting help. That doesn't change the underlying problem." "It changes something," he said. "They're not lying in a ditch. They're not missing. They're living somewhere we're not controlling." "Where do we go from here, Michael?" she asked. "Do you want to drag them back here so they can fall again in our hallway? Sign themselves out of Maple Ridge against medical advice? We tried doing this the gentle way and they bolted." He took a breath. "I'm going to see them," he said. "Alone, before the court date, before any more lawyers or doctors get added to this circus. I'm going to look my parents in the eye and ask what they want. And I'm going to listen this time." Her expression hardened. "So you're just giving up on guardianship?" she asked. "On a plan that protects everyone?" "I'm questioning whether it was about protection," he said, "or about making our lives easier at their expense." "That's not fair," she snapped. "I've been the one cleaning up after their little mistakes. I'm the one who has to adjust my work schedule every time your dad decides he doesn't need help, or your mom leaves the stove on, or you decide they're one step away from burning the house down." He cut in gently but firmly. Even when the doctor says otherwise, Vanessa blinked. She wasn't used to him interrupting her mid-argument. "What about the kids?" she demanded. "You're just going to leave them while you chase after two people who clearly don't want our help." "I'll be gone a day or two," he said. "Emma's old enough to understand I'm checking on Grandma and Grandpa. Noah will follow her lead, and this isn't chasing after them. This is catching up." She folded her arms. "And if they refuse to come back," she asked, "if they dig in their heels and say Millfield is their new kingdom, what then?" "Then we figure out how to be part of their lives without putting them under our roof or under your signature," he said. "We visit, we call, we send the kids to them when it's safe. We help on their terms, not ours." Vanessa stared at him as if seeing a stranger. "When did you start talking like this?" she asked. "When I realized the person I was most afraid of disappointing wasn't my father or my mother," he said quietly. "It was you, and that fear made me ignore what my parents were trying to say." She looked away. "Do whatever you want," she said finally. "But don't expect me to sit here and applaud while you throw away the only leverage we have to keep them from doing something reckless." "I'm not asking for applause," he replied. "I'm asking for understanding. But if I can't have that, I'll settle for your permission to take the car tomorrow." Millfield was smaller than he'd pictured. Driving down Main Street in his city sedan, Michael felt like he'd crashed a movie set for a different genre of life. People actually walked places. The grocery store still bagged with paper for regulars who refused to trust those flimsy plastic things. Kids rode bikes without being trailed by hovering SUVs. He found the Maple Grove Motel first, courtesy of the GPS. Room 7's curtain was open a crack. A familiar silhouette sat at the small table. Robert's shoulders, slightly hunched, book in hand. Michael parked and got out, heart hammering harder than it had when he'd signed the guardianship petition. He walked up the concrete walkway, each step echoing louder in his head than in the air. He knocked. The chair scraped inside. Rusty barked once, sharp startled. The door opened. Linda stood there in jeans dusted faintly with flour, hair pulled back in a loose clip. For a heartbeat, her face was blank with shock. "Michael," she breathed. He swallowed. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Can I come in?" Her grip on the door tightened. "How did you find us?" she asked. "Dr. Harris called," he said. "He got a records request. He thought I should know you were alive and picking new doctors." She closed her eyes, briefly exhaling. "Of course," she murmured. "Of all the loose threads I tried to tie up." Rusty shoved his nose past her leg, snuffling at Michael's pants. Michael reached down, scratching the dog's ears. "Hey, old man," he whispered. "Miss me?" Robert appeared behind Linda, leaning on his cane. His expression was wary, but his voice, when it came, held more weariness than anger. "You look tired," he said to his son. "Come in before the neighbors decide we're harboring fugitives." The room was small and neat. 2 beds, one clearly slept in, one made with motel precision. A stack of folded clothes, a folder of documents on the table, next to 2 styrofoam coffee cups and an open Bible. Michael sat on the unoccupied bed. It sagged more than he was used to. He folded his hands, suddenly at a loss. "You look good," he said finally. It sounded inadequate even to his own ears. "We look like people who've been working," Linda said. "It's a nice change from looking like problems taking up space in someone else's house." He flinched. "Mom," he began. You never meant for it to feel like that," she finished for him. "I know, but feelings don't ask for your permission before they show up." Silence stretched. Finally, Michael reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. He placed it on the table between them. "This," he said, "is the guardianship petition. Court dates in 2 weeks. I brought it so you could see what was about to happen. I also brought it so you could see this." He opened the envelope, slid the top page out, and tore it cleanly in half. Then he tore the halves into quarters. "I'm withdrawing it," he said. "If you want someone to speak for you someday, you can choose them. I'm done trying to do it behind your back." Linda stared at the pieces of paper, then at her son. "What changed?" she asked quietly. "Last time I heard your voice through the floor vent, you were letting her plan our future like she was reorganizing the pantry." He winced. "I heard something too," he said. "When you left. When I found the note. When the kids asked if they'd done something wrong. I heard myself explaining to them that Grandma and Grandpa went on a trip instead of telling them the truth. That we had backed you into a corner and you chose the only open door." He scrubbed a hand over his face. "This isn't me being noble," he added. "This is me realizing I was more afraid of conflict with my wife than I was of betraying my parents. That's not the man I want my kids to see." Robert's eyes narrowed slightly. "And Vanessa," he asked, "does she know you're here? Does she know what you're doing with that paper?" "Not yet," he said. "I told her I was coming. She doesn't agree with this. She thinks I'm throwing away our leverage." Linda heard the familiar word chosen so casually by Vanessa. The corner of her mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Well," she said, "at least she's consistent." Michael looked at her. Really looked, maybe for the first time in years without the lens of immediate crisis. "What do you want, Mom?" he asked. "For real. Not what you think you're supposed to say as a mother or a grandma. If you could write the next chapter, without worrying about anyone's judgment, what would it say?" She let the question sit between them, like a delicate piece of china. "I want," she said slowly, "to wake up in a space that's mine, a place I pay for, with money I earn or manage, not one someone else can revoke because I forgot to label a leftovers container. I want to be Linda, not just your mom or the extra burden in the guest room. I want to bake pies that make people's days better. I want to walk down a street where people know my name because of who I am now, not who I used to be." She took a breath. "And I want to be your mother," she continued. "Your kid's grandmother, but not at the cost of my dignity. If being in your life means sitting quietly while your wife builds a case to prove I'm incompetent, then I'll love you from a distance and bake for strangers instead." The room went very still. Robert reached over and took her hand. "I'm with her," he said. "I didn't sell our house to go live in a waiting room for the next phase of our lives. I did it to help you and to buy us some time. I won't spend what's left of that time having my choices second-guessed. Like I'm a teenager who borrowed the car without asking." Michael's throat burned. "You're right," he said finally. "About all of it, I honestly thought guardianship was the responsible thing, the adult thing. I grew up watching you handle everything, and suddenly I was the one with the mortgage and the kids and the aging parents, and I panicked. Vanessa had a plan. I clung to it because I didn't have one of my own." He looked at his hands. "I forgot that just because you need help with some things doesn't mean you forfeited the right to say no," he added. "I'm sorry for not listening, for letting someone else speak louder about your lives than you did." Linda felt tears sting her eyes. She blinked them away. "Sorry is a start," she said. "What comes next matters more." He nodded. "I want to be part of this," he said, gesturing around the small room, out toward the town. "Whatever you're building here. I don't mean move in," he smiled wryly, "although room 7 has a certain charm. But let me visit. Let me bring Emma and Noah when it makes sense. Let me help with rent if things get tight. Not as payment for control, but as gratitude for everything you already gave us." Robert snorted softly. "You pay full price for every pie your wife eats," he said. "That'll be gratitude enough." A surprised laugh escaped Linda's throat. Michael smiled, shakier than he'd like. "I can do that," he said. Linda studied her son, the boy who had broken the banister with a soccer ball, the man who had nearly broken her heart with a signature. "Hillfield is our home now," she said. "We're staying. We'll get off motel carpets as soon as we can manage first month's rent on something with fewer floral bedspreads. You're welcome here, so are the kids." She paused. "Vanessa," she added, "is welcome too, if she can sit at my table without planning how to take it away from me." He nodded slowly. "That might take time," he admitted. "She's not a villain, Mom. She's scared. Of her parents aging, of our finances collapsing, of losing control in a world where everything already feels like it's teetering. She grabbed onto the guardianship idea like a life raft. But you're right. Fear doesn't give her the right to steer your life." "I know she's not evil," Linda said. "I'm just not willing to be her project." They talked until Rusty sighed dramatically and flopped between them, as if declaring a moratorium on heavy topics. They shifted to lighter things: Betty's sharp tongue, Frank's gruff kindness, the absurd number of rakes in the supply store. Michael told them about Emma's spelling bee, Noah's obsession with dinosaurs, the way the house felt too quiet without Linda's humming in the kitchen. Finally, he glanced at his watch. "I should head back," he said. "Kids have school. Vanessa, well, she'll have opinions." Robert stood carefully. "Before you go," he said, "you should have something to take home." He rooted through his suitcase and pulled out a small wooden object wrapped in an old handkerchief. He handed it to Michael. Michael unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a carving of a little house. Not their old one. Not Michael's, but a simple structure with a front porch and a heart etched discreetly under the eaves. "For the kids?" he asked. "For you," Robert said. "Put it on a shelf. Let it remind you that home isn't the address on the mortgage or the mailing address on a court document. It's the place where people are allowed to be themselves without someone else constantly auditing them." Michael swallowed. "I don't deserve this," he said. "Maybe not yet," Robert replied. "But you came. That counts for something." At the door, Linda pulled him into a hug. For a second, he stiffened. Old habits bracing for a comment from Vanessa about boundaries or emotional manipulation. No comment came. Just the smell of flour and dish soap and the faintest whiff of cinnamon clinging to her sweater. "Drive safe," she said, "and call when you get home. Not because we'll panic if you don't, but because it'll be nice to know you made it." "I will," he promised. As he walked back to his car, he glanced once at the motel office. Joanne stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching like a bouncer of small-town secrets. She gave him a curt nod as if to say, "We saw. We'll remember." The first time Vanessa saw Millfield, it was from the passenger seat, jaw tight, hands knotted in her lap. It took her 3 weeks to agree to come. 3 weeks of conversations that started with shouting and ended with long, brittle silences. 3 weeks of Emma asking when she could see Grandma, of Noah proudly showing off the wooden house on the mantel to any visitor who walked in. In the end, it wasn't Michael who convinced her. It was Emma. "Mom," Emma said one night at bedtime, clutching her unicorn carving, "if Grandma and Grandpa can't come back, can we at least go where they are? I don't care if it's not a big house. I just want them to see my new dance routine." Vanessa had opened her mouth to recite the usual lines. "It's complicated, it's not safe, we're working on it." Instead, what came out was a sigh. "I'll talk to Daddy," she'd said. Now, as they pulled up in front of Betty's kitchen, Vanessa took in the hand-painted sign, the dozen cars parked at odd angles, the chalkboard propped on the sidewalk, advertising Linda's apple pie while it lasts. "She put her name on it," Vanessa murmured. Michael glanced at her. "Yes," he said. "She did." They stepped inside together with the kids. The diner was half full, late morning crowd lingering over coffee and gossip. Betty stood behind the counter, refilling mugs. She spotted them instantly. Her gaze flicked from Michael to Vanessa to the children. "You made it," she said to Michael. "Your mom's in the back. She'll want to see your little shadows before the lunch rush swallows her alive." Vanessa bristled automatically at being treated like a footnote in the introduction, then caught herself. Not her territory. not her staff, not her name on the menu board. Linda emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of cinnamon rolls. For a second she froze, eyes darting from Emma's eager face to Noah's bouncing excitement to Vanessa's rigid posture. Then she smiled. It wasn't the measured hostess smile she'd worn for years at Thanksgivings. It was smaller, less polished, but more real. "Well," she said, "looks like my best taste testers finally found my new lab." "Grandma," Emma squealed, racing forward. "Did you make all of this?" "With these two hands and Betty's temper at my back," Linda said, balancing the tray as Emma hugged her around the waist. Noah tugged at her sleeve. "Did you bring Rusty?" he asked. "He's at home taking a well-deserved nap," Linda said. "Even famous dogs need days off." Vanessa stepped forward, clearing her throat. "Hi, Linda," she said. It felt strange not to say Mrs. Carter. They had crossed that bridge years ago, but now formality seemed both too stiff and too familiar. "Vanessa," Linda replied. Her voice was neutral but not icy. A small victory. You look well," Vanessa managed. "The kids have been doing nothing but talk about your magic pies for a week." "That's because Betty threatens to ban anyone who doesn't compliment them," Linda said lightly. "Peer pressure is a powerful marketing tool." Betty snorted from behind the counter. "No need to lie to impress the city folks," she called. "They're good pies. I'd know. I ate my feelings through 2 divorces and a flood." A few regulars chuckled. The tension eased a notch. "Can we sit?" Michael asked. "Or do we need to make a reservation with your agent?" Linda glanced toward Betty, who jerked her chin toward an empty booth. "Take number 3, Betty said. "Far enough from the door nobody will eavesdrop. Close enough I can throw coffee at you if the decibel level gets stupid." They slid into the booth. Kids on one side, adults on the other. Linda set the tray of cinnamon rolls down in the center like a peace offering. For a moment no one spoke. Then Emma reached for a roll, icing smearing her fingers. "You taste like home," she declared around a mouthful. Linda's eyes went shiny. "Glad something does," she said. It was Vanessa who broke the heavier silence. "I owe you an apology," she said, surprising even herself with the bluntness. "More than one, probably." Linda looked at her steadily. "Go on," she said. Vanessa wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, fingers white at the knuckles. "I let my fear drive everything," she said. "Fear of losing our house, fear of the kids seeing you fall, fear of our lives becoming about doctor's appointments and medication charts. When you moved in, I saw every small mistake as proof of a pattern I'd already decided existed. I talked to lawyers and doctors before I talked to you." She swallowed. "I convinced myself I was the only one being rational," she continued, "because admitting I was scared felt weaker than wielding a plan. I told myself guardianship was love in legal form. I didn't notice how often I was saying our lives and our house, and how rarely I was saying your choice." Linda listened, hands folded in her lap. "I still think about safety," Vanessa said. "I'll probably always default to worst-case scenario planning. That's how my brain is wired. I'm starting to understand that safe can't mean stripped of autonomy. Not if we want our kids to see us as anything other than wardens when it's our turn to age." Michael watched his wife, surprised by the rawness under her polished words. "I'm sorry," Vanessa finished simply. "For treating you like a problem to be solved instead of family to be cared for. For talking about you like you weren't in the room. For trying to build a life for you without giving you the blueprints." Linda let the apology land. In another life, she might have rushed to soothe, to say it's okay, to spare Vanessa the discomfort of sitting with her own guilt. In this life, in this town, she chose something different. "Thank you," she said. "I'm not ready to forget everything, but I'm willing to believe you can learn from it." "That's more than I could manage a month ago." Vanessa nodded, relief and uncertainty warring in her eyes. "What does moving forward look like?" she asked. "For us, for the kids, for holidays even." Linda glanced at Michael, then at the children, then out the window where the water tower rose above Millfield like a quiet witness. "Moving forward looks like choice," she said. "You're welcome here. Not as rescuers, not as wardens, but as visitors, as family. We'll come to you sometimes, if we choose to, and if there are no surprise petitions waiting on the table when we walk in. We'll meet in the middle when we can. Parks, halfway towns, maybe a beach someday if my pie empire takes off." Emma's eyes lit up at the word beach. "Can Rusty come?" she asked. "Rusty goes where we go," Robert said. approaching the booth with a dish towel over his shoulder. He'd been in the back talking with Betty about a loose hinge on the kitchen door. Now he slid into the seat next to Linda, completing the circle. Noah tugged at his sleeve. "Grandpa, when I come here, can we build something?" he asked. "Mom says you know how to make anything out of wood." Robert smiled. "We'll start with something that won't break if I sneeze on it," he said. "Then we'll work our way up." Vanessa watched the exchange, some of the tension draining from her shoulders. She caught Linda's eye. "I'd like to help," she said quietly. "Not dictate, just help. If you need someone to look at medical bills, or to explain weird insurance letters, or whatever, no strings attached. You can say no. I'll ask, not assume," Linda considered. She thought of Dr. Patel's pamphlets of the healthcare proxies tucked in their folder, of the way her heart had raced when she'd first filled out a prescription form in a town where no one knew her yet. "Ask," she said. "He'll say yes sometimes, no other times. That's how adults do it." Vanessa nodded. "Fair," she said. They spent the rest of the visit on safer topics. Emma showed off a dance move between tables, nearly knocking into Betty, who pretended to scold her while hiding a smile. Noah drew a picture of Rusty wearing a chef's hat behind the diner counter. Michael asked Robert about helping him install new shelves in the kids' rooms on his next trip to the city. And Robert agreed, with the condition that he got final say on the lumber. When they left, Linda packed a box of pastries for the road, slapping Michael's hand away when he tried to sneak one before the car door closed. On the sidewalk, just before they climbed in, Vanessa turned back to Linda. "I don't know how to be in between," she admitted. "I'm used to being all in or all out. This middle place, where you're not under our roof but still in our lives, it scares me. I'm afraid I'll mess it up." "You will," Linda said, surprising her. "You'll say something too sharp. I'll take something too personally. We'll get knots in our stomachs and have to decide whether to talk it through or walk away." She reached out, rested a hand briefly on Vanessa's arm. "But there's room here," she added. "Room for us to do it badly and then better. That's more than we had when everything was being decided behind closed doors." Vanessa exhaled. "Okay," she said. "I'll see you soon." "We'll hold you to that," Linda replied. As the car pulled away, kids waving out the back window, Linda and Robert stood side by side on the sidewalk. Rusty sat between them, tail swishing lazily. Betty joined them, arms crossed. "You handle that better than most soap operas," she commented. "Fewer thrown drinks, more carbohydrates." "I considered chucking a pie at someone," Linda said, "but then I remembered how much work goes into the crust." Betty smirked. "Smart woman," she said. "You sticking around then, or you planning any more midnight bus escapes I should know about?" Linda looked down Main Street. The supply store, the clinic, the church steeple, the worn but sturdy houses. She thought of the motel room, and the little rental house Joanne had mentioned might open up next month. She thought of the legal forms with her and Robert's signatures, of the shred of paper that had once been a petition with their names on it. "We're staying," she said. "At least until you get tired of my baking. Then we'll renegotiate." "Good," Betty said. "Town likes you. Pies like you. I suppose I can learn to like you too." Frank's truck rumbled past, horn honking twice. He stuck his arm out the window in a wave. "Family's what you build," he called. "Blood's just the starter kit." Linda waved back. She took Robert's hand. "We jumped," she said softly, "and the net showed up after." "More like we knitted on the way down," he replied. "But yeah, it held." They turned back toward the diner, where the bell over the door jingled and someone shouted for more of that apology pie. Linda smiled. "Guess I'd better get to work," she said. "Turns out starting over is a full-time job." If this story of Linda and Robert's midnight escape and hard-won independence moved you, don't forget to support Stories Untold so more powerful emotional journeys can reach you. Hit like if you felt for them. Subscribe to the channel Stories Untold for more gripping family dramas, and tell in the comments. Whose side were you on at first, and did it change by the end?